Good afternoon, Mr. Ambassador. It is a great pleasure to have this conversation with you at your embassy.
Thank you. Thank you for making time, and thank you for coming here to have a chat and to give me the opportunity to profile and to showcase Singapore.
We know that you have just taken the office of Singaporean ambassador to China since May this year. So after living and working here for several months, how do you feel about your life and work here? Have you already adjusted to your new job?
Indeed, I've just taken up post in May, and I think I have settled in very well, thanks to my colleagues in the embassy who have helped me settle in very well. Also friends in China that I've gotten to know over the past months. And I find that in general, people here are very friendly and they are very prepared to make new friends. So I think in terms of settling down and in terms of getting used to life in Beijing and overall in China, is quite easy. And as I mentioned earlier, maybe in a way, I came in May, and I guess it is probably quite fortunate because I came at the start of the 五一劳动假期. So I actually didn't have to work for 1 week because the embassy was closed. And I used that 1 week to get to know Beijing, to take public transport, get to know the subway system, and even the public buses. So I find that the public transport systems here, it's actually very, very convenient, and it helped me settle in very fast. But I think more importantly is that I came at a time when China was reopening its borders. Because of that, people were coming in, were visiting China, and in particular, many of our delegations from Singapore have visited China. And this helped in also keeping me busy with work. And I think most of you would know that 繁忙呢也是挺好的一件事. So in a way, we have had many Singapore leaders who came to China, in particular Beijing. So even from my Prime Minister, my Deputy Prime Minister, my Foreign Minister, and many other ministers who have come to Beijing. And that also speaks volume of the depth of the relationship between China and Singapore. Of course, during the 3 years of COVID, there was also constant and regular interaction. But I guess there's still a difference. 线上跟线下呢，肯定有不同的。所以呢，自从3月，很多新加坡领导也到来了中国，线下呢也能跟中国的领导们会见。And I think that's a very good opportunity. And in all, it has made my work more fulfilling, more exciting, but very busy. Yeah.
So I know that before you have worked in Japan and South Korea, and
Yes.
this time to China.
Yes.
So do you have the experience of living and working here in China before?
I have never lived in China, but I have visited China many times. 都是出差嘛。但是呢，你可能也知道，出差的话呢，你只是看到酒店，要不然就看到会议的场所。You don't really have time to go around and understand
The culture.
the culture. I mean, people, of course, you get to meet officials, but you don't really meet the common people. You don't really get to understand the life. And more importantly, you are very much focused on just your work trip. So it's very different. Even for me, although I've only been here for months, because I'm staying here, I have to meet different people. I have to 我得去市场啊，我得去餐厅啊，所以呢，接触的人比较多。这也并不代表我已经了解很深了。接下来日子呢，我更希望呢能更了解中国。But I must say that compared to the times when I last visited China, my last trip to China was 2019, just before the COVID, and just before I was posted out of Singapore to Japan. I was in Chengdu for a meeting. But even by then, Chengdu was very developed. But within a space of 4 years that I came back, the transformation of China is very fast. And I think the whole atmosphere, the whole pace of life and the advancement, the vibrancy and the creativity of China, it's really very amazing. I'm enjoying it now, and I hope to be able to enjoy more going forward.
So although you are very busy, but this time you have more time to go around, to take the subway, to meet with local people, to enjoy the local food, and to know what is real China is about.
Yes, indeed. Well, I guess taking the public transport is not just something that I do as a tourist, but taking the public transport has become my way of life because I do it every day.
Really?
Yes.
You take public transport?
I don't stay here. 我们的使馆在这里啊，在秀水北街，但是我的官邸是在亮马桥啊。那还有一段距离哦，6公里。在天气好的时候呢，我是从官邸走到使馆呢。
走多久呢
？1个半小时。所以呢，已经变成我生活的一部分了。So it's not like a tourist going on. So I actually experienced the morning rush hour. I even had to stand right in front of the door because I'm the last one before the door closed of the subway. So, but all in all, it's an interesting experience, and I think it's also shows the vitality and the vibrancy of the city.
Is there anyone, I mean, on the public transport, recognize you that, oh, you are the ambassador of Singapore?
Actually, there was once. It's quite embarrassing.
That's very interesting.
In a way, it's interesting. It's also, it also means that I have to put up my best behavior, even in the public.
We have noticed that you have set up your personal account on Chinese social media platforms.
Yes.
So what you would like to share with us through your personal account?
Well, actually, I've always believed in moving with times, and that is 与时并进嘛。In today's world, you need technology. You need to make use of technology. And that is why, with the help of my lovely colleague who takes charge of all my media affairs, we decided that we could make use of the Weibo, 头条 账号嘛, as part of our public diplomacy efforts to profile not only Singapore, but also to introduce the softer aspects of the Chinese society back to Singapore. And I think it's a very useful platform. So in the 新加坡大使日记，我还有一个是好吃日记吧。
Yes.
I love food, and I've been enjoying lots and lots of different cuisine in China, not just Beijing, but also provincial cuisine, and I use that to showcase and to profile and send and even to introduce it to my friends in Singapore. And similarly, as I mentioned earlier, I also like to use the platform to showcase Singapore culture, Singapore food. I always believe that cultural diplomacy, or what you would call 人文交流, is actually very important. It is only through such softer aspects of exchanges that I think we can enhance mutual understanding between the people of both countries.
And I think maybe that is very efficient, especially among young people. And through these platforms, they can get to know what the Singapore ambassador is like and what Singapore is like.
I hope so. I hope so, because I always believe that culture, including food, is the best way to bring people closer together.
Exactly.
And I think, especially food, I always believe that to understand and to get closer to a person is through his or her stomach, and that is food.
And you have just mentioned that you want to use these platforms also to bring some Chinese food or Chinese culture back to Singapore. So people from Singapore also use these social networks as well?
Some of my friends are actually on WeChat, on Weixin. So I don't only post on the, I post on a Weixin account, but even 朋友圈 他们也能见到.
And you have mentioned food many times.
Yep.
I have noticed that you have posted many delicious food through pictures or
Yes.
through videos on
That's
your
right.
social platform.
That's right.
And so, what is your favorite Chinese cuisine? What is your favorite
it's too
Singaporean
actually
cuisine?
it's too many to list down a single, to narrow down to a single cuisine that I like. But if I may say, in Singapore, Singaporeans are very familiar with Chinese cuisine. And of course, when you talk about Singapore, in Singapore, Chinese cuisine, most people that are familiar today is things like 水煮鱼、酸菜鱼、重庆火锅，还有四川麻辣火锅。So it's things like that they are familiar. But what I hope to introduce to my friends in Singapore is really those not as known but equally good cuisine. So in Beijing, for example, one of my favorites is actually 卤煮.
You like it?
It's very good. And it's quite similar to one of the dishes we have in Singapore. So first of all, there's a familiarity. And it is quite exquisite because the taste of 卤煮, it brings back a lot of memory, at least for me, of my childhood. The other dish which I like a lot is 豆汁.
Oh, really?
And 焦圈. And 豆汁 and 焦圈, I don't think it's in Singapore, right? But 豆汁, I personally find it much better than yogurt. So if you can eat yogurt, you definitely can drink 豆汁. And if you don't quite like the taste of 豆汁 alone, you should have it together with 焦圈. Because it's the fragrance of the 焦圈 that mixes very well with the 豆汁. So it's things like that you don't find in Singapore that I wanted to introduce.
And many people have tried the combination of 豆汁 and 焦圈, but they finished 焦圈 and give up 豆汁.
You know, food in itself is just not about food. It's both about memories and about understanding the culture of the people. 豆汁 wasn't invented recently. It originated from way before. And it tells a lot of the history of China, where life was simpler and when the fermentation of such food was needed, because in the olden days, there was no refrigerator. And when you ferment something, it also becomes a healthy choice. And that also goes into the Chinese beliefs in 养生. So when you drink 豆汁, it's not just about drinking 豆汁 itself. It's about being able to understand part of the origin, the history, and the culture of Chinese people.
I think local people in Beijing will be so glad that Singaporean ambassador to China can have such a deep understanding of their food.
But I'm not sure whether my understanding was correct. This is what I always try to think about when I enjoy certain food.
And I think most Chinese people like me are quite familiar with Singapore, whether or not they have visited Singapore themselves, but most people are quite familiar with it. And if we search Singapore on the internet, we will easily identify some keywords such as rapid growth, financial hub, garden city, as well as the founding father of Singapore. Yes. And I think these keywords may constitute to most Chinese people's impression of Singapore. And as Singaporean ambassador to China, which aspect of Singapore you would like to share with us, introduce to us, what we should know more about Singapore?
I think many Chinese understand, know, and have visited Singapore. So the overall impression of Singapore has always been in the aspects of what you have just mentioned. And the most common of it will be things like it's rapid growth, as you mentioned. It is a clean city. It has many well-known destinations like the Gardens by the Bay, the Marina Bay Sands, the Merlion, the Jewel. It goes on and on and on. All these are good things. But I would like to go in slightly deeper to actually share with my Chinese friends that behind all this that you have described, the underlying significant thing in Singapore to me is really the multicultural, multi-ethnic, multi-religious society that we all live in. We have 4 major races in Singapore: Chinese, Malay, Indian, and Eurasian. No doubt, 3/4 of our population is ethnic Chinese, but we still have a significant proportion of people who are non-Chinese. And so in Singapore, you are seeing a very mixed culture, and it's not just mixed ethnicity, but also culturally mixed. Also, we have different religion. So in a place of 5.6 million people, we actually are able to live harmoniously with different races together. And this is something that our founding father, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, had decided that when we became independent in 1965, we have had a society of mixed people. And in order for the country to survive as a united nation, you need to have your people living harmoniously together. So therefore, from the very beginning, we have been taught in schools that everyone in Singapore is equal. Race, language, religion, we are all the same. And that has been the fundamental point that has kept Singapore going until today. And the work is not done yet. It is still a work in progress, because every time you have to remind people, different generation, your new generation, that we have to respect each other. We have to respect our differences. We have to accept people of different races, different religion and different culture, and we tolerate the practice of different traditions and cultures in Singapore. That's why if you go to Singapore, which I hope you will one day, to really take a look at Singapore as a city, as a nation, that people of different races can live together quite harmoniously. And actually, as I talk about multi-ethnicity, multiculturalism, it's precisely because of the multicultural and ethnic makeup of the Singapore society, our food is also influenced by that. So our food is really mixed. Of course, you can find Chinese food, Malay food, Indian food, and others. But there are also, because of all this interaction and influence, you actually get food that is quite different from what you would get in China. You would know that our forefathers in Singapore, many of them came from southern China. And of course, we also have Indians who come down from southern India. We also have cross-border immigrants coming from Malaysia or even from Indonesia and all other parts of the world. But because of all these interactions, some of the dishes are recreated and has evolved into a Singapore dish. In the past, in the 13th, 14th century, where China was seeking trade with what today is known as Southeast Asia, and at that time, you all would call it Nanyang. So this was one of the story of 郑和下西洋嘛. They came down to where it was today in Malacca, even to Singapore. At that time, all this didn't exist. So when they came down, they started the established trade. They married the Tushen, the Tuzu. At that time, the whole of Nanyang was actually a fishing village. And there were a lot of Malays staying there. So it's actually a mix of Chinese and Malay races. And the offsprings, 女的呢就叫娘惹，男的叫爸爸。So that was how Peranakan came about, even from the 13th, 14th century. And subsequently, a lot of Chinese traders over the years came down to, again, the Nanyang, and then they married the local women who were mostly Malay. And that's how the offsprings are called Peranakan.
Peranakan.
娘惹族. And also because of that, the 娘惹菜肴呢 is a mix of Malay and Chinese, together with Southeast Asian spice. 东南亚的就是那些很多的辛料、香料. So all the dishes is very unique.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for introducing Singapore to all of us. Thank you, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you very much.